Day and welcome everyone. This is Hanging with Education. There are a few people joining us in chat. I can see David Rosen's already there. And I know some people usually trickle in as we get started. I want to remind everyone that if you're having difficulty typing in the chat field, we had someone last week have some difficulties with that. They emailed me afterwards. It turns out that some locations, some schools, or some areas turn off chat ports, and that includes the chat that is in the live streaming page. So if that's the case, you can try to email me. I'll try to look at that during the session, but we will have to come up with some other way for people to be able to chat if they have that chat blocker in their location. Tonight, we're going to be looking at different ways we can use the Google tools to have learners exploring college and career options. I have a lot of students who come in and I ask them, do you have any ideas of what you'd like to do? And they're like, well, I think I might want to do this, I might want to do that, but they really don't have any ideas of what's available. And they think about their local areas and what's available in the local area and say, well, whatever's going to pay a paycheck, because there's not a whole lot of work available in this particular region or that particular region. So we took a look at different options that other programs have used. I'm sure people have heard of ONET before. If you haven't, I just want to take a look at it real quick. ONET has a very nice interest profiler that allows students to answer a number of questions, and I'll just show you what this looks like real quick. It's choosing between I strongly dislike something versus I strongly like. So the student isn't talking about what they're good at, it's more what they prefer and what they like to do. And it's going through what's not a test and everything else, and you can see it's page 1 of 5. This might be a little small, so I'll try to zoom in on this. So it's simply an iconograph where this is something I don't like to do, building kitchen cabinets, but maybe I like to lay bricks. And the student just goes through for each job or each activity and rates whether they like those activities or not. And if it's something they feel, I don't care either way on that, they can click this middle unsure button. After they're done all 60 questions, the program will give them some scores. Now I'm going to take some scores from a former student of mine. I just worked with them this last week on this, and I'm going to plug their results in. So when you come back to ONET, you can always enter your scores in. So I always have students write down their scores after they're done. And they put in some scores, like this person had a 27, 15, a 20. And I would not be typing this in during the same session we did it in, because the program would automatically have all these scores. Once I type all these in, assuming I had done that in a previous session, we would have some of this stuff. And this used to be how we would start our exploration. And this is nice. We still use this. We still do this, but we don't introduce it at the start. And the reason we don't, students really wanted to start with more general thinking and start easing into broad descriptions of what kind of work they might like to entertain. So we started with some worksheets that we did up that helped them thinking about it, and then trying to put all that information in one place became a hassle. So we went to our intake, and if you were with us last week, or if you'd like to review the session, it was recorded, it's on the YouTube page, so people can review that if they like. We had the intake where students can fill in the state intake form and our multiple intelligence forms, and then our learning styles. And all of that information gets put on one profile page so that a teacher immediately can see all the information that's relevant to the learner and has some discussion material. So the learner and the student, the learner and the teacher can talk about, linguistics intelligence versus interpersonal, intrapersonal. What's the difference between these two? And then down here, the learning styles, I shared how these links bring not only descriptions of what the learning style means, but what are some teaching strategies that help with these particular learning styles. So this is a nice tool that we said, well, why don't we put the college tracking in here? So after they've done the intake, maybe at a later date, they come back and they start exploring some college and career options. So we took our worksheets and we tried to integrate that in here. We had some success in different places. And we thought it was good for students just to start with, these are skills I already feel I have. We have a number of areas, and I'll just scroll through these. Now, I am zoomed in quite a bit on my screen. So please let me know in the chat box if you cannot see the text as I scroll up and down here slowly. But just to show you, we have creative, artistic, people skills. There's a good number of skills here. So there's almost 100 skills here. And students would simply identify, oh yeah, I can operate a computer. I can, I don't even know what a checkbook is, so I'm going to skip that. I don't have a budget, but I can use a telephone. So I'm just going to go through and I'm going to put some X's to simulate a student putting down some things. Obviously, the student and I usually talk through the list. I had a student ask me today, matter of fact, speaking English in another language. They're like, well, what other language? Does it matter? And I asked them, do you know another language? They said, I know a few swear words in Spanish. I said, well, that probably doesn't qualify. You probably want to skip. But the student felt like they had to put X's everywhere. Oh, yeah, I can use a map. Oh, yeah, I can do this. I can do that. And I asked them, I said, well, what do you use maps for? And he says, oh, I never use them. I can. And I was like, okay, so is that something you want to put down that, you can if you were asked to? And that's a good discussion because I had not had that brought to my attention before. Just because you think you can do it and maybe you never do it unless somebody asks you to, does that mean it's something that you really feel comfortable and competent with? Sometimes they may. And I know when the student was sharing some of these skills, and I'm just randomly clicking as we're talking here. I know listening to the student for a long time before we had done this, I know some of the things that he said, well, I could do this and that and the other thing. He may not be able to do it with the level of success that one might hope. And that's okay. This is just a skills identification. What does the learner self-identify? And as we know, self-identification is always subjective. And we don't necessarily have to make any snap judgments on it. It's just to get some relative information. With all of this information entered, the student can then click on the next tab, which is the skill summary. This is all using a spreadsheet. This is Google Sheets, for those of you who have not used Google Sheets before. And I don't know why, but that got squished, so I'll fix that. I can see the relative percentages from each of the categories listed here. And that's from the previous page. And it also creates this wonderful little pie graph. I find that learners appreciate graphics that help describe them. And this is their own description. Remember, this is all subjective based on what they feel they know. And we might talk about the comfort levels they have with this. Now, this particular student, because I was randomly clicking around, doesn't have a whole lot of areas where they're particularly weak. I mean, management skill is 29% of the whole pie here, but it's not really significant. Some students, they have like 0 in some category. And that really is a great discussion piece. None of this is to make judgment. It's all for discussion purposes. And adult learners really appreciate the fact that they have something to talk about rather than this wide open world of what do you want to be when you grow up or what kind of job do you want. This is about them, their choices, and how they feel. And it's a nice, safe way for them to start the conversations that will lead into career exploration. Down here, you'll notice there are sorted values. So all the values from above are just sorted here. And that's important because I'm going to have these top 3 values repeated later on in the process, and that will automatically be generated. So I might ask students, okay, people skills. That seems to be one of your highest, and your second highest is technology skills. Can you think of careers that involve people skills and technical skills? And when I say technical skills, they immediately start thinking, oh, is that computers, or is that, highly specialized skills like, maybe someone who works on surgery, or maybe they're an auto technician that works only on specific parts. And in this case, it was more of the computer technical skills. But they start brainstorming just some ideas. And we start talking about whether that would be a comfort to them or not. With some jobs in mind, the next thing we move into is something called a jobs value inventory. This one, on the surface, it's really fun to watch learners go through this process. On the surface, it sounds easy. Rank the items below from 1 to 12, with 1 being most important and 12 being the least important of the job values. So almost immediately, probably because it's first, people decide to choose good salary. But then they start reading through the rest of these and they're going, oh, wait a second. No, I really like some of these others. Maybe that's not best. Maybe I'd like to actually have a job. Wait a second, I can't put 1 down here. I want job security. How come I can't put that in? I set this up so that once a number is used, it doesn't get used again. So that's a kind of an anti-cheat thing for students. And they're like, oh man, I want to put 1s on all these things. But they have to make some critical decisions. So maybe job security and then benefits. They keep hearing about the cost of benefits. So maybe benefits is their number 2 thing. Then maybe that salary comes in, but boy, having an opportunity to learn and advance is good. And boy, if you work with a bunch of jerks, that's not good either. So these are really hard choices. And it's really interesting to have a conversation with learners after they're done with this. And I have not seen trends yet as to what is the least and what is the most valued items. Number 1 varies a lot. I've seen benefits be number 1, good salary, job security. Compatible coworkers I've seen number 1. So it'd be interesting for those of you looking through this list, think about that with yourself. What would you say in your current position if you're working? What's most important to you? What do you value most from your job? And what's the thing you value least? So maybe the student doesn't care about what the organization wants. That's really low on them. Maybe they don't want to develop skills very much. I'm just going to fill in some numbers here for our fictitious student at this point. And as I fill some of these in, I'm kind of recoiling. Oh, I wouldn't want that one 10. Oh, I wouldn't want that one low. I'd want that one high. And again, this isn't about judgment. It's simply about keeping the conversation going and building the conversation towards some decisions the student can make. So far, let me recap. I've asked the students to self-identify skills that they feel they have already. If they were to go to an employer, they can say, yeah, I'm okay with this stuff. I can do these things. And then from that, they have a graphic that helps illustrate their comparative strengths and weaknesses based on their own opinion of themselves. And then they took those opinions to the next level and prioritized aspects of a job they felt were most important. Now I feel the stage is pretty well set to dive into ONET studies. So this next tab, called self-exploration, is where the student can identify, do you like working with people, things, or data? Just a general category here. I had one student today who just really likes to work with his hands. And he says, I'd much rather work with things than people any day. Okay. And data, he says, no, don't get me near a computer. I'll break them. Notice how these fields are automatically filled in. So the student, one of the big problems with forms and worksheets and stuff is students having to put the same information in over and over and over again. Students really value the fact that this is automatically filled in from previous screens. And that's one of the advantages of having this tab system in a spreadsheet format. If you'll look real quickly here, I don't want to geek people out too much, but up here in the formula bar, you may not be able to read that because of the font size and the video right now, but it's a big if statement that basically says if the jobs value inventory at a particular place is empty, then put the jobs value inventory from something else or put a space. It has a way of checking, have they chosen all three values, or at least three? If they haven't, leave this blank. If they have made all their choices, then fill it in. And I can demonstrate that real quick. I'll go back to the jobs value inventory. I'll highlight all these choices. And for now, I'm going to copy it. And I'm just going to hit delete so they're all gone. When I go back to the self-exploration, that if statement goes and checks and says, oh, wait, there aren't numbers 1, 2, and 3 actually selected. Therefore, I'll just leave those blank. And when the student fills all these in, that is done. So I'm just giving you a little heads up about how these things are set up in case you'd like to set up your own. I'll check real quickly for questions. Hi, Kristen. She says I'm late, but she did get connected to the chat, which is great. Welcome aboard, Kristen. If you have any questions, anybody who's viewing this, please go ahead and type those in. I will check from time to time to see what's going on. So the student has those first tabs. Now we're ready to go off to ONET and do the interest profiler. And I've heard a lot of different ways this profiler is used. One thing I saw in 2 different locations was after a student gets their numbers, we usually go through what is realistic, what is investigative. So they know the vocabulary. What are all these things referring to? And then when we get to the job zones and we talk about what job zone they're currently in, I work with a lot of students who are working to get their high school diploma or equivalency. So a lot of them are in job zone 1, which is basically untrained and they don't have a high school diploma yet. So rather than working on the current job zone they're in, I asked them to choose one job from a job zone that's higher than where they're at. So many of my learners come in at 1 or 2 very often. They either have a high school diploma or they're still working on that. A 3 would be associate's degree. You might think of it that way. High job preparation, you're talking more like bachelor's level, and extensive is, after that, when you start talking masters, PhDs, and everything else after that. So obviously the pay scale and opportunities goes up as you go down this list. And the idea is to have students extend themselves a little bit by choosing a level above them, but also to try to look at least 2 or 3 levels higher than where they're at to see if there's a job in there. And then I have them choose one job that's of their own choosing. For instance, I had a student who insisted he wanted to be a bull rider. He said, I'm going to be a professional bull rider. Now, granted, this is northern Maine. We don't have a whole lot of rodeo here in Maine at all. In fact, I don't think there is a rodeo here in Maine. But he was convinced he was going to go out in the Midwest and he's going to be part of the rodeo and he's going to be riding bulls. So you know what? We put that down as a job. But then I asked him to choose something from level 2, and he actually chose something from level 3 as well, something with an associate's degree. They were both related to bull riding, which turned out to be very advantageous for him. And you'll hear why as we go down through this line. So I'll go to the next just so you can see what happens. I'm going to choose Job Zone 2, assuming I need a high school diploma. And one more click here. What will happen is I get this list of what jobs best fit me. The open puzzle piece, let me see if I can zoom this in a little bit because it's probably a little blurry. So I get these puzzle pieces on the left-hand side. If they're filled in, they're a good fit. And then towards the bottom of this list, depending on my scores. Now, I had scores that were pretty close to an average. So a lot of opportunities open up. For scores that have very high marks and very low marks, this list is usually much narrower. Mine's almost flat line. I can do everything here. But down here, you can see like biofuels processing technicians. That one's, you could probably do it. It's not a strong one, but you could do it. This column over here with the little sunbursts, these are fields that are anticipated by the job markets to be good job opportunities in the near future. So biofuels, that's going to be a good one. Biomass plants. These other ones with the dots, that doesn't mean there's no jobs. It just means, the outlook doesn't scream, hi, we're going to increase the job market in certain areas. Some of the areas, thank you, David, for the feedback on the text, saying it's nice and big and easy to read. Some of the areas, for instance, rough carpenters, I found out, and when you click on this, I'll show you what this looks like. But in Maine, there's a big future for rough carpenters, according to the data, which, that's interesting. I wasn't really sure where that was coming from. This last column indicates whether it's a green technology or a green career, something that might be important for the environment or environmental movements. And there was one other column. Oh, I know why I can't see it because I've scrolled in so much. There is another column over here. And let me see if I can find the symbol. There it is. This career has apprenticeship opportunities. So, for instance, heavy and tractor, trailer, truck drivers. That is an up-and-coming occupation. It's potentially a green economy, and it has apprenticeship or mentoring type opportunities. But of course, the student says, I've always wanted to drive truck. Let me check that out. When I click on this, again, I am zoomed in, so the resolution, when you look at it, it isn't quite so spread out. But what I like about this is it describes the job. Sometimes a student clicks on it like, what the heck is this job? And the description is nice because it tells them what it is. And I like that it gives them a little feedback on what would you do in this job? What kind of things? What kind of knowledge is available? What kind of skills do you need? And what kind of abilities? Down here, what kind of technology are you using? And what kind of personality do you need to be successful? And it's funny, no matter where they rate themselves on salary on the previous inventory, almost all of them go right down here and they look at this bottom line and say, oh my God, that's all they make? Or, oh wow, look, I can make this much. David's offering a caution here that job and career growth depend greatly on the locality, so students also need very local data. That's very true, and each state has a career search that we also use as a further exploration after this. But if I click down here and find jobs, it says check out my state. Sorry, check out my state is what we might do. This gives a general idea of where truck drivers might be up and coming. So this bright outlook gives us a little bit of an idea. So for instance, I'm up here in Maine and it says average opportunity. It's not like it's bad, it's not great. Some of the low, Florida doesn't look like their trucking industry is going to be, booming anytime soon. Whereas, some of the Midwest places, it does look like there's some pretty healthy trucking opportunities coming up. Whereas if I chose a different career field, Let me just go back a page or two. And wait a second. Oh, I have to go back here. Let me choose another one. Let's just say a glazer. All right, that's glass and windows and skylights. When I come down here and check out my state, it gives me a general idea. Now, when a student sees white on their state, they immediately say, oh no, our state stinks for that. I have to keep reminding them, reading graphs, it's kind of important. It says no data is available. That means we don't reliably know any trends. We're going to have to go look at local state information to see what our state labor markets might have on that. But they can see, where in the United States might I be looking for a job with this particular skill. So yes, the local accessibility is quite important, especially for some of our learners who are not thinking about leaving state or just going anywhere where a job is. So we've done the ONET. We've explored a little bit level 2. I also asked them, and just so you can see, I'm going to jump up here to level 5 to see what this particular profile would be great fits. Remote sensing scientists and technologists. I'm not really sure what a remote sensing scientist is, so I just want to click on that real quick. Apply remote sensing principles and methods to analyze data and solve problems in areas such as natural resource management, urban planning, homeland security. Okay, so I get a general idea of what that is, and I can read what kind of things I would do on the job, and I get more of a feel for that job. But notice that with this interest profile, with the decisions I made earlier, I don't have anything that's a great fit up here at level 5. So maybe I don't really want to be thinking PhD, master's level. It just doesn't seem to be something that just screams to me that it fits my feelings right now. Now, my feelings do change over time, so we might want to revisit this as well. David offers another caution. How will acceleration of automation and robotization affect this field? For example, trucking in 20 years may be all automated with self-driving trucks, loaded and unloaded by robots. This whole career exploration from a personal perspective, it's kind of a crapshoot. If you think about the last 5 years or 4 years, let's say, what was around 4 years ago? How much have we changed in just 4 years? As David points out, the workplace is changing at such incredible rates. This is definitely not something where we're going to set our minds on, definitely going to do this. And that's why I asked him to choose 3 occupations. So let's go back to our sheet now and see how those 3 occupations are used. So the 3 top things, I found out I'm definitely going to be that bull rider. And there's probably an official name for that. I apologize for those of you who do rodeo. You'll have to send me suggestions of what those bull riders are called, if there is a specific name for that. I'm bull rider. I want to be a truck driver. And this is long hauling. And another thing I put down, let's say I have some interest in maybe training animals, so animal trainer. Because, I grew up on a farm and I've had animals my whole life. So I'm just going to put those down. Now, the bull rider might have been my freebie. That's the one that I didn't care what level I was at. The truck driver, maybe that's a level above where I'm at. And the animal trainer, I probably need much more schooling than I have right now to become that animal trainer. Now, I also may have other exploration. This is what ONET has indicated, and I'm just going to copy that down here just because in this particular case, I don't have occupations that are going to differ from that. But they may have family connections. My family has always done this career. I really would like to follow in line with that. In which case, sometimes I ask, well, you want to be a bull rider and you also want to take over the lumber mill your family's been running. Do you have a stronger pull either way? And some cases, we've actually added 4 categories here instead of 3. But the main goal is we've looked at what do I value in a job? What skills do I feel like I have? I've done 2 inventories now and started looking at what jobs are available and some information about them. Now I'm ready to really dig in. So the next tab is where I do occupational exploration. At this, and you'll notice it fills in from previous screens. So there's occupation 1, occupation 2, and then occupation 3 is filled in. This is where we may go back to ONET to get some information. But if it's possible, I try to work within my local networks and my digital networks online to find a truck driver. Now, it turns out I have at least 6 former students of mine that do truck driving. So it's pretty easy for me to just pop on Facebook and toss them a message and say, hey, can you connect with one of my current students? They'd like to talk to you about truck driving. And we can set that up. So I try to get the student working with their writing skills on developing questions for an interview. So if you're going to interview a truck driver, what kind of questions would you like to do? And from that interview, the student's goal is to fill in these blanks. Now, if they can't do an interview, or even if they can do the interview, I'd like them to also find that information online or in various local resources, from the career centers in our town, or for the Maine State Job Bank in Maine, or whatever state you're in. But they're doing this research to explore really what their job is. Now, in my student who wants to be the bull rider, I actually was able to connect him to a bull rider, and we emailed about 6 or 7 of them. We got responses back from 3 of them. One of them is a retired bull rider. We found his information online, and it turns out that that information was 2 or 3 years old. So we got a nice letter back from the retired one, and it was talking about how he retired 2 years ago because of the physical demands and how he can barely walk now. He needs assistance of a walker, and how he has had some other ailments. And he was sharing a lot of negatives about it that the student really didn't have in his radar at all. And then he found one that just got into the business. He's loving it, but he's hearing about the hours, or he's hearing about the training, or he's hearing about certain aspects of the job that caused him to think a little bit like, oh, maybe this might not be good. And when he turned out, after he did all 3 of these, he decided that he wanted to be a truck driver, but he wanted to still work with bulls. So he was going to be the guy in the rodeo who hauls the bulls from rodeo to rodeo. And that was the job he wanted. I said, okay, well, let's go do the research on that. Can we find an annual salary? Can we find out, what the people do in this? And we reconnected with other people. So meanwhile, we're working on our English skills, where we're talking about communicating with people. We're looking up data and charts, and the life expectancy of bull riders. That was cool. We found some data on that, and we actually saw the insurance rates for bull riders and why they were so high. That was really great to do some chart analysis and graph analysis. Finally, we still got 3 fields. Now it's time to start planning. For each job, whether they're going to do it or not, we want to know what would it take to get into this position. So this is where we start doing our planning. And this later ties into an individualized learning plan, which has both short-term and long-term goals. And if people are interested, maybe we can take a look at that before we close off today real quick. So we asked for what kind of degrees do I need? What kind of licenses do I need for this? And that one surprised them. Do I need a license to ride a bull? They knew you needed a license for driving truck, but they weren't aware of how many different licenses they were. They just thought, okay, I had a license, I can haul things with a certain size rig. But then when you start talking about hazardous contaminants, there's different licenses for that, different licenses for carrying livestock versus just freight, different types of trailer bodies require different licenses in some states. So they just had all these different licenses they weren't aware of. And they said, well, where can I get those? Can I get those licenses here in state, or do I have to go other places? And how much will it cost? That was a nice big one for them to realize. Boy, I'd like to do all three of these jobs, but that one down here, there's no way I can afford that, especially when you come up with, can I get grants? And this prompted some letters to some of the institutes they found. So they'd write some letters, and of course they'd get back a lot of things like, oh, we'd love to have you, and we offer financial aid, and it's individual for each person. But as they dug deeper and deeper and deeper, they'd get more information about, is there anything special available to help them get through that educational experience. In some cases, they might find mentorship programs in local areas, or that the school system hooks students up with. So this is our form that we created to have all this information in one place. And if you weren't here last week, I do want to remind you that all of this information, I'm going to go back to my Google Drive right now. And I have a folder for all my students. Now, this is a sample folder, so obviously it's not a live folder. This is the copy we were just playing around with. I would rename that copy for the sample student. So sample student intake and careers. And that file would go into a folder with all my students. So if I open up my students, I've already got this Ed Latham person. I've already processed him. I would make a new folder for my sample student. And then I would put my intake form in there. Now this folder, my student files folder, that is shared with the staff that will be working with these students. So if I need information on Ed Latham, I'd open him up. I'd see his intake and his careers information. I'd open that up and I'd have all that information available to me, so I can better plan how I can meet Ed's needs versus Mr. Sample Student, and how I might meet those needs. I'm going to do a quick check here for questions. Okay, nothing there yet. So this process got me thinking about some other uses at ONET, because there is such a large amount of information. I'm curious, for those of you who are watching the stream, if you have other interest profilers you use, could you share, or that you know about, could you share what those profilers are? And if you've had any experience with ONET, could you maybe share a little bit of some compare and contrast between what those other profilers do versus ONET? My experience has only been with ONET, so I'm a bit limited in that. When I go back to ONET's site, let me see if I can get back to home here. All right, this is their site. I have to zoom out a little because I'm used to seeing the screen much further out. One of the things you can do on these places is search for careers. And it's really interesting to see the industry. So this is Browse Careers by Industry, and they have a bunch of different choices. And I'm going to just click Browse. And that's Administrative Services. But if I click on this, I can choose a bunch of different things. So for instance, construction, I can hit go, and it's going to give me a bunch of different jobs that are available. And what I thought when I was working with students on this, when they started talking about general fields they would like to get into, a lot of students are overwhelmed by this kind of list. This list is huge. So this is construction, and look at all these construction jobs. Now it's nice because I may not have known there was this many construction jobs available. These are other people that may work in construction, part-time or full-time. I'm going to zoom back in again so you can see that screen. But this is overwhelming. The number of choices here, I quickly had a lot of adult learners get frustrated with this. So I thought, is there a way to break this down a little bit? I like the fact that ONET has clusters, so I can choose different clusters and get information. And I see a question just popped up here. Kristen sharing, she's used the site qualityinfo.org to help students explore possible jobs in Oregon. Oh, cool. Qualityinfo.org. Let me see if I can go there real quick. I'll copy this and I'll paste this into a new tab. Let me verify that this is showing up on the feed once I get there. And I can see that this says jobs and career, find a job. Oh, it's got information about unemployment here. And I can choose different areas. Oh, this is nice. I like this map where they can look at different regions and say, oh, I live here. Oh, man, maybe I need to move from here. So they might move to the hot spots, or hopefully they've been around the state so they have a little bit of local geography. And I can see over here job title or occupational title. So I can find it by title or by profiles. So that's neat as well. Thank you for sharing that. Let me see if it's showing up. Yeah, that is showing up. Good. Under jobs and careers, there's a career explorer. So let's check that out. Jobs and careers. Up here, jobs and careers, career explorer. So if I click on career explorer, this will take a moment to load. All right, so I have a whole bunch of occupations found. I can choose from different types. Okay, so they have clusters here as well. This is nice. I notice they break it down a little differently, but again, it might be some of the clusters that ONET has, well, they just may not have a whole lot of openings. Healthcare seems to be like universal. I mean, healthcare is like everywhere. So I'll click on healthcare. I like that they can choose what level of education they're going to try to get to. So let's say healthcare with a high school diploma. And it would be funny if I chose a wage 50,000 plus just to see, can I get a job for 50,000? And Kristen's also sharing with me that under occupation and wage information, they also have some information, also jobs and career at the top. So there's a bunch of different types of data they allow us to do. Let's just see if I can get a report of everything with a high school diploma. I could choose high demand, low skills. I just want to see what in healthcare I can get with just a high school diploma, according to them. I like this that it has the growth and the replacement. I'm assuming that's how many people are going to be retiring in a certain amount of time, and what is the need for replacement within that field. Support workers, I'm assuming that's CNAs. I don't know. I can click on it and find out. And, I think a lot of states have tools that really do work well in state, because every state has a vested interest in trying to keep its population there. Obviously, if everybody exits the state, that puts the state in some financial trouble. So there is a very good reason for local states to have a tool like this. But if I want to think more nationally as a student, and look, I've lived in Maine all this time, I want to go see another place, especially with my younger learners. They like the national scene that ONET provides. We've gone through some of the main state tools like this, and they said, no, I want to look elsewhere first, and then maybe I'll come back to this, and we'll work on that. But let's go back to what can we do within the Google tools. I want to introduce you to a tool that, boy, very few people I meet have played around with this tool much. I'm going to show you the end result first. I just started this last night, so it is not finished by any means. It was just playing around with a prototype. I took the career clusters from ONET, and I put them into a format that would look nice on my cell phone, and it would also look nice on my tablet, so I can just try them on different formats. The font size is very small here because of projection, but when I look at it on devices, it's not that bad. And what I wanted was nice colorful boxes where there was only a few at a time. And you'll notice here there's 15. There's 15 total clusters in ONET. When a student clicks on a cluster, it automatically opens up with the subfields within that cluster. So I was choosing agricultural and food and natural resources, and I have all these different choices now, some of which I recognize. Plants, okay, that's farmers dealing with plants. Natural resources, yeah, those are the people that EPA type and things like that, and the food processor. Okay, I get that, but what's agribusiness systems? I have no idea what that is. So now the student can click on agribusiness systems. All this data, by the way, I got from ONET. Now in agribusiness systems, I can see that there are 10 different things that are possible. Now some of these you'll see in other places, like graphic designers, you'll see that in other job explorations. And that's okay, because they need to see, oh wow, I could be a graphic designer here, 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 here. But let's just say I didn't know what, let me see, a food scientist and technologist. Wow, okay. Someone can study food. Let's check that out. So when they click on this, it brings them to an ONET Online occupational summary. It talks about what they, let me see if I can zoom that up, because I know that's going to be pretty hard to see. So we have a paragraph to determine what kind of things they do, what kind of titles they have for jobs. So if I want to go talk to somebody about a job, these are names I might use. Do you know a food technologist? I personally can't think of anybody I know who's a food technologist, so that's not a field I'm familiar with. But this summary has all kinds of tasks that somebody might do in this field, and they have little checkbox next to them. And they're connected to other related occupations. So if I say, boy, checking raw ingredients for maturity and stability, for processing of finished products, for safety, quality, and nutritional value. You know what? I don't think I like this job, but I like that aspect. I like that task. So I can see what other jobs might be related. And it says down here, 20 related occupations. So this may expose students to different types of work that they can then relate back to career fields. And this is just chock full. If you haven't been to these ONET summaries, it's pretty powerful, all the information that's here. So when students are doing research, they love to go here first, but I ask them to get a few different sources just to work on their research abilities. And we come down here to detailed work activities, working in context, the job zones, what education's required. And they've actually, percentage of respondents, they've talked to people who do this job to see what kind of degrees they have. So they didn't ask the employers, actually maybe they did ask the employers, I don't know on that one. But they asked people in the field, what do you need for this job? I can find training right here. So remember in the worksheet that we had to find where can I get this training. So this button here was very helpful for students. Related occupations, my wages, again, they like that kind of thing. And I can get local. David brought up the local and how important it is to know local. I know some of the salaries here in Maine are way lower than some of the other places, but then some of the salaries here in Maine for different jobs are a little bit higher, which is really based on local needs. And I can see employment trends. So if I do employment trends and I select a state, let's say Maine in this case, and hit go. So I can see food scientists and technology in the United States, it looks like a 4% change. And it shows me about 590 jobs are opening annually across the United States. Compared to that big old fat goose egg for Maine, I'm like, well, if I want to stay in state, not a whole lot of jobs look like they're going to be opening up in this field here. But, I can compete for one of those almost 600 jobs out there around the country if that's something I want to do. And again, I'd caution everybody, I think, again, as David mentioned earlier, what's going to happen 2 years, 4 years, even 5 years down the line when some of our learners might complete some of these programs. We don't know what that job's going to look like. So it's good to always have options and revisit this frequently. It's not like a one and done. All right, I got my 3 jobs. I'm done. Don't bug me for 3 years. This almost should be an annual review as part of the annual intake. It doesn't take long, and I find learners love having the focus of the 3 different jobs. So when a student says, look, I'm really having a hard time with this Pythagorean theorem junk, is there anything that we can relate to in any of these 3 careers about Pythagorean theorems? And, that's where we'll work together and we'll find some resources, or I'll make them up with the student. Sometimes we'll come up with projects, hands-on, if they're hands-on learners that deal with structure writing. Maybe they have to go ahead and they have to set up a route for me where they're going to deliver things, pick up stuff, deliver them to a different place, pick up stuff after they unload and get back. So they have this triangle of delivering things, but I want, the shortest distance, but I give them some certain goals of where they have to reach in the country. So now they're looking at maps, trying to find roads that approximate triangles, and then they have to, of course, do the math to figure out, comparisons. So we have a context to put all the learning activities into, which was very helpful for us. So this idea of using the drawing, the push button tools to get us to filter through all these career maps, I thought that was really cool that I could do that on a spreadsheet. And for those of you curious about how we set this up, this is a Google site. And normally in Google Sites, you can't just put graphics here and have them clickable and stuff. But the more I learn about how Google thinks, the more I find it very intriguing. For this kind of information with graphics on a web page, I'm going to introduce you to Google Drawing real quick. Let me go to my folder. Oh, no, I don't have that here. I'm sorry. And this is one of the problems with having many different folders, is where did you put things. In Google Drawing, it's very similar to Microsoft Draw in that you can draw stuff and put it into a word processor. I find this has a whole lot more power because it's vector-based. If you're not sure what the difference between a vector program and a bitmap program are, think of it as painting is bitmap. Once you splash some paint on there, you can't take an eraser and erase the paint. Vector is shapes that once you draw them, you can click on them and move them around a little bit and reposition, resize. You can tweak things, you can delete things pretty easily with vector. Now, you'll notice I've moved this green box all around, and I've got the alignment off a little bit for all these. Well, there's tools so that if I highlight all of this, I can go up to a range and say align that by the tops. And immediately that aligns all up for me. This spacing, again, I just hit distribute horizontally, and it sets that spacing up for me. So once you get proficient with these tools, there are a number of different shapes you can use, arrows, callouts. There was another session we did on comics and how you can use drawing, some of the drawing tools for comics. This would be even more powerful setting this up. So what I do is I set up the general format for the image, and then I set up the links. Where do I want this box going to? And I'll come over and I'll click on the link button right here under more, and I'll plug in the link, and it already has the link in here. I'm going to change something dramatically so you can see what happens on the website. I'm going to change this green to a different color green. I'd like to have this nice bright green, and that text is a little hard to read on that dark green like that, so I'm going to change that to white and see if it's better. It's not quite, but I'll go back and fix it later. Now if I go back to my web page, we can see that it's still here because this page hasn't been refreshed. When I refresh the page, though, it automatically will fix anything I change on the old image. So let's say I need to change a link. When I click on this, I don't want it to go where it's going now. I go back to the drawing, back to the drawing board, click on it, change the link, and then I can go back to my web page and refresh, and it's all done. And once I got used to this, I'm like, what a slick system. Basically, your drawing tool gives you the user interface you want online. And I'm going to change this right back here just because those colors are really hard to read here. Let me put that back. All right, so that black on that green is kind of nice. And notice Google saves everything almost immediately when you're done. And I come back here and I'll refresh my web page. Okay. Maybe I have to refresh it. Might take a minute or two depending on internet. All right, that is saved here. Great. Every time you go to demo something has to go wrong, right? But this does upgrade fairly quickly. And right now, it must be using a cached copy. So I'm going to have to shut that tab down and reopen it to get it to refresh that particular element. But it really is like to design your interface in drawing. And you'll notice that in my Google Drive, I have it arranged with everything with titles so I can keep track of what's where and how it's located. I will give you a caution though, if you try this where you do a drawing and then put it into a web page, you see how this has the little meeples here? That's the sharing icon, and these do not have the sharing icon. If I put environmental services, if I put that drawing into a web page, people would not be able to get to it because they don't have rights. I have to, in my drawing, well, I already have the drawing open, I have to publish to the web. This is how Google says, are you going to make this resource something everybody can get to? And all you have to do is click that link that says publish to web. It makes this up for you. You just close it after you've done that, and now it'll be visible on your web page. If you don't do that, you'll see it, but other people will not see it. And that's a lesson I learned pretty quickly this morning when I had a friend go check this out for me, and it turned out they didn't have access to any of the pages, which was frustrating because I wanted to have them play with some of this stuff. So I'm going to be doing it like this. I'm working next week with a bunch of aspiring young female programmers. I'm going to teach them how to make a phone app, and I'm going to use this as an example of how they can quickly and easily make a phone app through MIT's App Inventor 2, which is really a cool thing. Maybe we should do that as well. Kristen's pointing out it doesn't allow URLs, but you can space it out, and we can remove the spaces to type in our browser. Okay. Oh, that's David was saying. I'm sorry, I skipped ahead. David said, I have a list of job and career pathways, short information video site on the literacy list, but this chat area doesn't allow URLs, so email. So David dropped his email list in there as well. And he does. David has a collection of resources that's phenomenal, and I encourage everybody, if you have access to the chat window right now, to toss him an email and say, hey, I'd like that literacy list, so you can take a look through that information. That's about everything I wanted to share. I thought it was really interesting with the way to integrate drawing with web pages. That's something that I had not explored until recently, and it was based off this career exploration topic. I also wanted to share just a little bit of the process that this has been 4 different adult ed programs have worked together. I've taken things from all 4 different programs, working with their staffs to create this flow from self-exploration, skills identification, all the way through how am I going to get to the job I have interest in. I do have one more thing I want to mention. I don't know if what's going to happen, so I do welcome you along for the ride. But Google has just changed over some of its technologies. So you'll see a little icon down in the lower right-hand corner called Explore. This is something that allows you to give voice commands, and it will go ahead and try to do its best in whatever tool you're working with. I'm not really sure how this is going to go. Let me try it. Okay, let's try it out. Okay, I'm going to make a copy of my document so I don't mess it up. I like that suggestion. Oh, here's a copy of... All right, this is a sample that they have going on right now. So you can play with Explore without messing up your own stuff. Maybe I click on Argentina. I hit Explore. I can ask a question about my data. I can change the formatting. I can do an analysis. Oh, wow. Check that out. So what the Explorer is doing is it's looking at the spreadsheet I currently have open, and it's trying to give me information that might be important. I got a nice little scatter plot here. Oh, I've got this nice little histogram built up here for every increase of 10 team matches. Wow. So I don't have to know anything about spreadsheets. I can now hit Explore with some data in there, and I start getting different representations of that data, and now I can choose as a student which one of these might be best for the particular job I'm trying to do. So if I'm trying to show, which soccer team is the best out of this particular example, I have all these different charts that are automatically generated for me. And this is just Explore for spreadsheets. I believe the Explore tool is available on other tools. So Google Documents would have that. I wonder if the Google Drawing has that. No, they don't have it down here for Google Drawing. I'm not seeing anything down there. Let me check the questions, see if anybody had any parting questions here. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for exploring some of these options. I thank David and Kristen for joining us, especially because I love to hear some of the things you guys had to share. I look forward to digging into David's literacy list that he has some videos for jobs and career pathways. And Kristen, thank you very much for sharing that site about how Oregon is doing something similar to ONET. And I'm sure other states have tools that are doing similar work. As always, I encourage you to visit 5squared.us. And if I just type that in here, and it's just the number 5, the word squared.us, and that'll bring you to my consulting website where we have Hanging with Education is right here. And you have a place where you can suggest topics. And that's just a simple form that just asks for your email, what topic you'd like to have, and then just where are you coming from in the country. And then over here you have upcoming sessions. Any links that we have, these are previous archive sessions, so you can review. Last week, for instance, we talked about using Google Sheets for intake process. So if you missed that and you'd like to review that, the link is here. And that'll bring you back to the YouTube page where you can get that. I'd like to wish everybody a good night, and thank you very much for joining us.